Hi everyone, it's Em here from Recovery Devon, and I've brought you down to the beach today. I'm really lucky to live very close to what you can see now, so I'm on my daily exercise walk. And today's Recovery Devon Daily is on a subject that most people don't like to talk about. We're going to talk about grief today, and there's a few reasons for that. The first is that I think grief is something that's around for a lot of us at the moment, not necessarily grief due to bereavement, which I'll come on to in a minute, but grief for some of the small things that we might have lost, smaller and bigger things that have changed the way we're living our lives right now, right up to and including bereavement. We do get messages to the page now and again from people who've lost a way of life, maybe lost their so-called sanity, lost relationships, jobs, and I think at the moment there's a lot of insecurity around about losses big and small that we're all experiencing. So grief is a pertinent subject, and I'm really proud that Recovery Devon is an organisation that doesn't shy away from some of these more difficult subjects. So with that in mind, we're going to supply some links with this video to some useful resources on grief, and some of the grief models, some of the ways that we human beings have tried to understand this mysterious process of grief over the millennia. Some of the famous ones are Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief model. Another one is there's a grief arc that you might have seen with different points on the arc from when you reach the very bottom of your grief and then begin to come back to the top again. But today I want to share with you one that I found really helpful personally. I've experienced a number of losses in my life, right through from sort of traumatic and shocking deaths of loved ones, through to losing jobs, losing security, and losing my mind. You know, I've had a few losses, but I want to talk about the small things too, or the so-called small things. So last week our Wi-Fi went down, and that was the thing that broke me last week. That was the thing that made me cry. So loss and change is something that humans aren't great at dealing with. And a few years ago somebody showed me something called a grief spiral, which, and I don't know who to credit for it, please let me know if you know who came up with this amazing thing, and people who I've shared it with have found it helpful. So I'm going to turn the camera around and show you. So here we are, this is my grief spiral. In the middle here we've got the shocking event, so let's call it a loss of a job. So you've had this terrible shocking news, and radiating out from this shock are lots of different feelings, and I think they're different for each person. There could be fear, anxiety, anger, blame, jealousy, sadness, hopelessness. And when you first have this shock, you go round and round really tightly around this event, feeling all of these different emotions, and in the space of half an hour you can go through grief, shock, pain, fear, anxiety, panic, hysteria. It just goes round and round really quickly, but over time you still keep moving through it, but the gaps between them start to get a little bit bigger. So maybe you find that you can go a whole hour without being sad or tearful, and then eventually that might move into a day, and eventually that could move into a few days, or even a week or a month. So the grief's still with you, the shocking event is still with you, but the gaps between, the space is getting bigger and bigger all the time. And to give a really personal example of this, I lost my dad about 20 years ago in a very shocking way. It was a car crash, and in the beginning I was tightly wrapped, for a long time, maybe 4 or 5 weeks, just not really sure which way to turn and not sure what my emotions were going to do next. But now I'm all the way out here 20 years later, and I find I can go 6-7 months without thinking about my dad at all. But when I hit one of these points, it's still as raw as it ever was. It's just that the space between is bigger, and I get more breathing space and more capacity to deal with the difficult feelings. There's more space between them. So I'm just going to turn the camera around again, because I don't know if you can see, but when I came down to the beach earlier, I drew a big spiral on the beach, and I do this sometimes. Might be hard for the camera to pick up, but there on the beach in the sand is a huge spiral. And a lovely thing that I hadn't planned for when I made this video, but that's happened, is that people and their dogs and their kids have walked through the spiral. And that's another thing that happens, is things change, and new people come into your life, and new experiences come into your life, and the landscape changes. So with that in mind, I'm going to take you into the middle of my spiral. I'll turn the camera around again. Here we go. So this is the beginning, and I'm going to imagine that here I am at the start, and here we go, spinning at first, spinning, not knowing where to turn, but the spiral gets a bit bigger and there's a bit more space, and you can start to take in the landscape, start to see what's around you, start to see where your points of safety are, and on you go through the journey. I'm being visited by a dog. Hello, dog. Hello. That's rather lovely. So whatever you're grieving and wherever you are on your journey, I just want to leave you with this thought, which is that you don't move on, you don't get past it, but you do move forwards in time. And even though sometimes, as you can see here, it feels like you're repeating yourself and just going round and round, walking the same old ground, well, you are in a way, but the landscape just does change. You get more space, you get visited by friendly dogs, and the tide changes, the light changes, and you move on, you move forwards, but it stays with you, and that's as it should be, because these difficult things are the things that shape us and can be just as precious to us as the happy things and the joyful things. So I wish you well, hope you find this helpful, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.